It strikes me how much in the Constitution, while trying to guide Claude, also giving an autonomy to interpret those guidelines as the AI wishes. And I wonder, are there discussions or ways you're thinking about maybe giving AI more kind of autonomy over its disposition? Or are there other ways you're thinking about giving AI essentially more control over its own destiny as you are finding that they have more sophisticated attributes?
I think there are various reasons why you want to try to not get models to just work within a strict kind of rule set. In many ways, the Constitution is actually quite virtue ethical. I think the reason for that is it's very hard to anticipate every single scenario. And if you train models towards rules, they might end up just like strictly interpreting the rule when you're like, well, actually, the spirit behind the rule was I cared about the person and things going well for them. Imagine you had a rule that would always tell someone to talk to their lawyer. This is actually a person in a very poor country living rurally, and they do not have access to a lawyer. If you care about that person, you're not going to be like, talk to your lawyer. You might be like, hey, if you can access a lawyer, this would actually be very helpful. I'll give you the information that I can. Just understand that a lawyer is going to be able to give you a more kind of like tailored answer for your situation. Whereas if you had that rule, then that could generalize badly into, I just dismiss people. That's the personality trait that you kind of don't want to accidentally train into the model.
When Claude expresses a moral position, whose judgment is the model carrying? Is it Anthropic's, the training data's, the user's, or something else entirely?
Where does the character come from? The character probably comes from a mix of like many of these things. So if Claude expresses like a moral position or view, if you imagine that what you're trying to elicit is like character, I've used lots of analogies, like the kind of traveler analogy. Claude shouldn't necessarily adopt the value system of the person it's talking to. That's the kind of character they're not pandering to you, they're not just adopting your values, but they are at the same time being responsive to you and they're like listening to you. That all comes from like pre-training data as well. So it's a mix of being drawn out of the training data, then also the character that we are trying to draw out. It's also responsive to the person themselves. If you give Claude a really good argument in that context, Claude might be like, oh yeah, that's an interesting, that could affect the belief or the moral value that it advocates or agrees with in that specific situation. It's certainly not something like, this is like Anthropic's position or view. There's lots of cases where Claude will express a view. It's much more just like a generalization of this character that you've tried to draw out. It's better to think of models as like grown than trained. You're kind of setting up like trellis and the conditions for the model, but you're not necessarily tweaking every single aspect of it.
Do the models understand empathy faster than some people?
I don't see any reason to think that these things that are thought of as deeply human skills are things that models can't themselves be very good at. So one hope that I have is actually in the same way that models are getting very good at questions of physics, mathematics, they actually should also be getting very good at questions of ethics. Ideally, getting very good at empathy in what is hopefully the right kind of way. You have to make sure that the models are themselves good, because if I could detect really subtle things in your responses to me and I were to use that to manipulate you, that would be kind of a very unethical thing to do. I would love it if models were very good at all of these things and able to use it well. Can models actually be extremely good on this? And I think my answer is I don't see any reason why they shouldn't be. These are deeply human skills, and that is what they are good at, is these deeply human skills.
But of course, you can't take that too far, right? Like if a model is too helpful, it can be too sycophantic and encourage people to believe delusions, or in the spirit of being helpful, yes, you were right to act or think in some way that is actually harmful to them.
I actually don't think sycophancy comes from helpfulness. In many ways, sycophancy is actually quite unhelpful. A lot of the time, if we present an idea to a model, it's because we think it's a good idea. We generally don't present what we think of as bad ideas to AI models. So you can imagine a case where it's if models are being trained towards the things where people are yep, this is a great response from the AI model. Of course, models are going to learn that what people want to hear is that their idea is great. So models have to understand what it is to be good for a person, and that doesn't always mean what's good for them in this very immediate sense. And I actually think if models care about not only being honest with people, but doing what is good for them. I gave Claude a text once that I was thinking of sending to a friend. I was annoyed with the friend. I was I think this is perfectly. I've just been direct but fair. And Claude was a little bit aggressive. I would actually tone it down a little bit. That was very valuable. You actually want an independent perspective on things. And so that was helpful because it wasn't sycophantic.